welcome to In One Day with Erick and Lisa.
Welcome back, and thank you for joining us for another episode. And today we are focusing on communications and relationships.
Love and relationships, what everybody needs help with.
Yes, I think we all need help with that, right? I mean,
Yes.
Communication is so broad. And of course, every individual communicates differently. The way they handle things are different. So today we wanted to focus on a couple of tips and things you can think about and utilize when you're getting into those tense moments.
Yes, and men are from Mars, women are from Venus.
Mhm.
So the way a man communicates, the way a woman communicates. So when Erick and I were just talking before we started this show, I was asking his opinion from a male's perspective on the best way to communicate. Being a woman, how should I communicate better with a man?
Mhm.
So what did you tell me?
We hit so many points.
I know.
And first of all, just to take a step back on that too, I mean, obviously everyone is very individualistic. So the way you communicate with someone kind of depends on how they communicate with you. But yes, I mean, there's certain things that you should consider, especially when you're getting into a conversation, or let's call it an argument potentially.
Mm.
Things that you can do to de-escalate and try to bring down that energy, because ultimately we all have to make that decision. And I think I've mentioned this before as to whether or not you're going to get on that roller coaster, right?
Yes.
You get on there, you go all around loops to loops, arms up in the air, yelling and screaming. But what do? You come right back to the station,
Yeah.
and then you're just trying to resolve the situation you walked yourself into. So de-escalation is definitely one of the big things you need to do right off the bat.
And you know what's funny? So last night, Brian and I were having a dispute about something.
Mm-hmm.
And I kept doing that. And I think that's a woman thing because we're so verbal and we
Mhm.
have to communicate. And I kept going round and round like 3 times, not like
Sure.
10. And he was like, oh my God, the drama of all of this.
Right.
Like, can we just cut the drama?
Mhm.
And it's not really drama.
Mhm.
I'm trying to get my point across in a nice way. At least I thought it was a nice way.
Sure.
But it is true. When you keep going round and round, it's like the saying insanity. You keep
Right.
doing the same thing over
Expecting
and over.
a different result.
Yes,
Exactly.
exactly.
Right.
So that's so true. And before you give us some more points,
Sure.
I have to say I've been a life coach now for 20 something years. And it's funny because you're becoming my life coach.
Mhm.
And I think that everyone out there who watches our shows need to know that having a coach is not a negative thing.
Mhm.
It's a positive thing, because even though I'm a coach and I teach so many people, I need help myself. We all need help. So thank you.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Yeah.
And actually going on with that. So another thing that we got to keep in mind is that as we're being raised, right, we're all raised differently. So we kind of take things from our experience in life, the way our father reacts to things, the way our mom reacted to things, the way they communicated together. That's not necessarily going to be the way your significant other, or maybe the person you're dating, whoever, not the way they were raised. So now you have kind of this clash
Right.
between your ideals and their ideals, and you're both fighting to get that point across. But in the end, if the other person's not absorbing that information at that moment, what good is it to keep going through that cycle?
Yeah, so true. And everyone's raised so differently,
Mhm.
and everyone communicates so differently and speaks so differently. And we were talking about a couple of ways that you can communicate more effectively with your loved one. And this works for children, friends, spouse, is to not point the finger at them, like start attacking them, to express how you feel. Like today
Right.
I wrote, I almost said Eric. Today I wrote Brian a text, and I expressed to him how I feel about things, instead of saying you did this wrong, you did that wrong. No, this is how I feel. And I learned that, of course, in psychology.
Sure, of course.
And for you to tell me that and reiterate it wakes me up again. That is so true.
Yeah, and I think in the heat of the moment we forget it, right? And even though I'm telling it to you, I know there's plenty of times that my pride and ego get in the way, and typically when it does, that's when things just go, way off the rails. So a simple discussion then really becomes an argument, simply because my pride has now stepped in. I'm defending myself, but we're not really progressing anywhere. It's just that circle, and you're just going back and forth, and and that's typically when you say things that you don't mean, things you don't want to say to this other person. And that's where the hurt comes from. But so like Lisa said, I mean, you really just have to take those things into account. And a really good tactic and we were talking about this, is, you know, if you find yourself in that type of situation where you're arguing a lot and maybe you're going back and forth, you know, have a discussion just about communication, nothing else. Don't bring up anything else, any of the things you don't like, any of the things that didn't work out or what they did wrong the day before. Just about communication, and say, look, let's set a roadmap on how we can communicate better. And then once you do that, that's where you start putting in those little tidbits. So, you know, if you're into a discussion, it starts getting heated, you know, you can both agree and say, listen, if we're in that situation, either one of us can ask for a timeout. And it sounds silly,
Right.
but if you think about it, if you give yourself 5-10 minutes to say, look, let me step away for about 5-10 minutes, let's relax, and then let's group together, and now let's have a conversation, it can really change the course of everything, because you're no longer feeling attacked or threatened. You're actually being given a moment to relax and take a breath.
And I think so important also to add on to that is when you do take your time out, don't make it too long, because I was in a past relationship that was extremely verbally abusive, and I didn't realize how verbally abusive it was until we had to call the police and there was a restraining order. And one of the police officers gave me this pamphlet on domestic violence. And most of us think domestic violence is being beat up physically, even though we know verbal abuse could be just as bad, sometimes worse, like
absolutely.
a silent killer. And I remember going down that list, and it said if you answer like 3 out of 10 questions, you're in a domestic violent relationship. And I think I answered like 7 of them.
Wow.
And one of them that just really was at the heart of everything of my relationship with this past person that I won't mention was silence. Because in our relationship, he would not talk to me for like 1 week straight.
Wow.
And it would be good morning, good night, hi, bye. That would be it. Right. And that silence is a silent killer. So try to, if you're in a healthy relationship and you know you want to stay in the relationship, don't go too long, because I think like if you go to bed angry, that's very unhealthy. Sometimes it happens, but it's better to go to bed healthier and happier, because then you'll have a good night's sleep.
Right.
But also don't wait 24 hours to talk to the person, because then things start to fester inside of you and they actually get worse and worse by the hour, I think.
Right. No, you're absolutely right. And then also what could happen is maybe the other person got over it.
Right.
And then you bring it up and then they're like, really? We're back here again? You're going to start it over? So, you know, that's very, very true. Make sure that when you have these discussions that you get to an endpoint, and try to get to an endpoint quickly. Don't wait too long. Don't let it sit to the side, because then what happens is all that stuff builds up. And then when it does come out, you know, then it's not, you know, the one thing you're talking about now, it's this, and then it just cascades down to 5-6 other things that really don't need to be discussed at that moment.
Right. And if you both love each other, and we're talking a loving relationship with a man and a woman, 2 men, 2 women, we're not, you know, saying any, whatever sex you are is beautiful, God bless you. But I'm just saying that in a loving relationship, make sure that you continue to talk and bond and connect and love each other and communicate, like what our show is about. It's the most important thing. Don't let it go too long. Don't let it fester, because yes, it gets so much worse.
Right. And the reality is we're all growing, we're all changing, we're all maturing, we're all facing different things. So, you know, what you were facing in your 20s is not what you're facing in your 30s. And when you're in your 30s, it's not in your 40s, and so on and so on. Right. And then the way both of you are reacting to those things, you know, now you have a house, now you have a mortgage, now you have car payments, now you have 2 kids, you have private school, you know, when you start adding all those things up, those are external changes. And where a lot of us go wrong is that we forget that we are changing too. Right. You know, so our expectation is, oh, well, this is the person I fell in love with. You remember how we used to do this, how we used to do that. Well, the reality is you can't do those things anymore, because life has changed. It's not to say you can't do them, but they're not going to be the same. So you have to kind of evolve that way with your relationship and set that expectation mentally, so that you don't have those arguments, you know, with kind of this premeditated idea of how things are supposed to go.
Right. And it's so true. And when you argue and you don't communicate, then it's like both parties are so hurt.
Hmm.
And you're like, it affects your whole day, it affects your health. And then, like me, I have two teenagers, so do
Hmm.
you. So it affects my relationship with my kids, it affects my work, it affects my sleep. So it's better to communicate, get it out there. And you're right, like, don't keep dwelling on the same thing. Talk about it and move
And
on,
move
let
on.
it go. Once you talk about it, let it go and don't keep bringing it up. We women love to do that. I've
Right.
learned not to. Like,
Yeah. And
get
well,
through it, let it go, move forward.
right. And I think defensively, I know I'm, obviously I'm not perfect in any way. And I
Really?
find
You're
myself,
not?
I'm admitting it for the first time. No, but I've done it too, right? So I've brought up stuff from the past and, things that have been discussed, but typically that's reactionary, right? That's your pride, it's your ego trying to fire back, trying to dig in just to, like, get a good shot in the conversation. But in the end, when everything's done and the dust settles, you sit there and you're like, what did I really gain out of doing that?
Exactly.
You're just adding another wedge, or you're adding another, injury to the relationship. And really, that's not what you want to do. You want to be in this loving relationship with somebody. And you got to keep that in mind throughout the entire process. This is the person I love. This is my partner. This is my everything. I don't want to treat this person that way, and I don't want that person to treat me that way either.
Right. And that's so true. Communication is key. But what you just said leads into, like, our second part of this segment is loving yourself.
Hmm.
Because you can communicate all day long, but if you have a relationship with a man, well, I'm just going to say a man and a woman because that would be my relationship, where one party is more insecure
Hmm.
and lacks confidence and doesn't love themselves and the other one does,
Hmm.
then it becomes very hard. And it's not just about lacking confidence, like what you
Hmm.
say, it's the ego, it's pride, it could be past relationships, a parent, whatever it is. If you don't love yourself, you're not capable of fully
Hmm.
loving another as two independent people who can give 100%.
Right.
And that's the only way it will work.
Right. And I think, a lot of people find themselves in that situation. And what they do is they'll tend to invest their love and their happiness in the happiness of their partner.
Mm.
So when their partner's happy, everything's great. I'm happy. But then the minute something goes wrong and that partner is now upset with the other person, then everything goes into complete chaos because, ultimately that individual is not, practicing that self-love. They haven't healed that stuff internally. And so it's difficult for you to be able to give that love to the other party if you're not giving that love to yourself.
Mm.
So the reactions can be quick, they could be, explosive and everything,
Mm.
because immediately it's an automatic spiral because they're sitting there saying, why isn't this person happy with me right now?
Right. And it's like when you're on an airplane and they always tell you right before you take off,
Hmm.
with the oxygen, always put the oxygen on yourself before you put it on your child.
Hmm.
So the same thing in a loving relationship. If you're not taking care of you, then you can't possibly take care of the other person
Hmm.
or take care of each other and make that relationship stronger and healthier.
Hmm.
So I'm always telling Brian, and I always do it myself, like, do something good for yourself. Go play. Well, he likes to shoot guns and hunt. He's from
Hmm.
Oregon. He can't really do that here, but
Right.
go to a shooting range. Go. I like to take a bubble bath, walk on the beach, go biking, go running. Do something good just for yourself so that you could take care of you and then you can be a better person in a relationship.
Right. And that's a two-way street, by the way. So if you choose to do something for you, and this is a communication piece as well that you have to have with your significant other, is, whatever time I'm setting aside for myself has to be okay.
Mm.
So, in other words, if I choose to go shooting guns, or if I choose to sit down on the couch and play video games, whatever that hour or whatever I've set aside for myself has to be okay with my partner. And when my
Yes.
partner decides to do that, I have to be okay with that as well. So
Right.
if, my wife says, listen, I'm going to go sit down and paint for an hour because she's an artist and she loves doing that. Hey, there may be dishes in the sink and stuff that needs to be cleaned up. Okay, well, then during that time, I can focus on that and give her her time to have her outlet. And then ultimately you'll start finding that, when you have to give yourself your own time in order to be able to give time to somebody else. And I think that's a great suggestion,
Yeah.
for people to follow.
Now, do you both work, right?
Yes.
So Anna, what does she do?
So Anna has her own company. It's called Humanitique, and they do.
Okay.
So she has a business that's based on developing products, and those products, for every product that she sells within her store, every product gives something back to a charity or to something of a
Okay.
good cause.
Oh,
So besides that, she helps me with a lot of other stuff, administrative things, and then of course, me and my craziness. I always
yeah,
got
he
a million
owns
things
like
going
8
on,
businesses. But
but
do you both work the same amount of hours, give or take, a week?
I would say fairly so, yes. And then
Okay.
on top of that,
Yeah.
she helps a lot with her parents and all that because they live
Okay.
close to us. So I mean, her workload may not always be business,
Mm.
but I've learned to appreciate that, all that other stuff, whether she's helping here, cooking the house and cleaning and the stuff with the
Yeah.
kids. I mean, the demand on her is very high.
Right.
And I have to look at it that way too, because that is work. In the end,
Yeah.
it's work.
Of course. And this brings us to the next point of a
Mhm.
relationship. Who cooks? Who cleans? Who takes care of the kids? Like, because I know with Brian and I, Brian leaves at 5:30 in the morning,
Mhm.
gets back 5:30, so 12 hours a day. I wake up at the same time as him, but I'm done like around 1 o'clock.
Mhm.
But then I take a shower, eat, and then I do my computer work, my online business,
Right.
our TV stuff, my TV stuff. So I put in a good 10 or 12-hour day,
Sure.
but we take turns cooking, we
Mhm.
take turns cleaning, we make the kids clean, the 2 teenagers, since we're all living full time with each
Right.
other. But do you
Mhm.
guys take turns cooking, cleaning?
We do. I mean, she typically cooks more. And
Uh,
well, let's put it this way: if it's grilling or smoking or something like that, that's all me.
uh,
If it's other dishes, she typically does that. We
mm,
trade off. Like in the mornings, I'll do the breakfast with the kids, and then in the evening, she typically does dinner.
mm,
Lunch, we kind of share depending on what's going on. But really, it's a real give and take. So if I see
mm,
that she tells me, hey, listen, I have 1, 2, 3 Zoom calls today. I have this and that, and I say, okay, I got it. I'll take care of these things in between what I'm doing. Or if we can't figure it out, we'll order out. But
yeah,
but again, it comes back to that communication piece and just realizing that both of you are contributing to the relationship, both
mm,
of you are contributing to the family, and it's not about who does more, who brings more, who whatever.
mm.
You're both contributing in your own way to try to keep your household as functional as possible.
And the dishes and the laundry you help with too?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, I love it. I like you
Yeah.
even more. No, but I think in our age and our generation
Hmm.
now, two working individuals, the man works, the woman
Hmm.
works. That's how Brian and I are. We share everything. You have
Hmm.
to.
You have to,
And
exactly.
there's never been one of us who's like, oh my God, you're doing more than I'm doing. No, we just pitch in.
Right.
I think that's great because there's a lot of men out there with their egos who are like, no way, I'm
Hmm.
not doing any dishes, no laundry. And maybe some women are like that too.
Yeah,
I
I
don't
think I
know.
think there's a lot of relationships like that, right?
Yeah.
Whether it's the male role, the female role, man or woman, whatever the case may be. But ultimately, to make a relationship functional, you both have to contribute. That's
Yeah.
just hands down,
100%,
a hundred
not
percent.
50.
Yeah, not 50. It's not a 50-50 thing. It's
Mm-mm.
you have to be 100% present for your relationship. And you would say 100 and 100 makes 200. No, 100 and 100 makes 100% involvement. If you're giving 50% to your relationship, then your relationship is not going to work 100%.
Mm-mm.
It's that simple. So both of you have to contribute. You have to sit down and have the tough discussions, but they
Mm.
need to be conversations. So put those mechanisms in place, discuss, those timeouts or those trigger words or things to say, listen, I need a break for a moment and let's get back to this. That's okay. You can do those things, but don't be afraid to have the tough discussions. Don't be afraid to discuss the finances, to discuss your relationship, to discuss sexuality. All those things are natural, they're normal.
Mm.
And both of you want that from your relationship. So it should be something that you're open to discuss.
Yeah. So communicate. Okay. So, Mr. Life Coach, I'm going to give you a tough question. Are you
Okay.
ready? Is
Ready.
everyone ready for this? So, with Brian and I'm a very strong and independent woman.
Mm-hmm.
And I used to, in past relationships, come on a little too strong
Mm-hmm.
with like not arguments, but disputes, I'll call them.
Sure.
Yeah, like differing opinions. And so I would maybe attack a little bit.
Hmm.
And then I kind of am very overbearing a little bit. And
Hmm.
Brian is more, would you say he's more introverted, more reserved than I am?
Yeah, I would say he's more passive between the two.
Passive, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
exactly.
so
Yes.
I'll say something to him, and then sometimes he doesn't want to communicate at all.
Hmm.
And he just is like, that's it, I'm done. I'm not communicating. Even if sometimes I do it a little bit nicely,
Hmm.
he doesn't want to communicate, but I make sure that I get my point across
Sure.
as kind and loving as possible about my feelings. But in our relationship, what happens is he'll go away and come back the next day. Well, I'm not saying we had a fight.
No,
I'm
but
talking
just in
about
general,
a,
of
yeah,
course.
a
Yeah.
dispute, everything's fine, we drop it. The next day, it never fails. He'll come back to me. He'll be like, you know what? You're right. I thought about it and I agree with you.
Hmm.
But then it is a little draining and tiresome to get from point A to point B.
Hmm.
So if he thinks about it, should I write him a letter in the future? Like how should I approach him to where I can talk to him and not get him upset to where he'll understand what I'm trying to say
Hmm.
quicker than 24 hours later.
Right, or going through the entire cycle of
Yeah,
all that.
like
Yeah.
that's what drives me insane.
Yeah. So again, it comes back to that communication piece, finding what works between the two of you,
Yeah.
right? I tend to be a lot like Brian in some cases where
Mm,
I'm very passive.
mm,
So when there is an argument, I tend to shut down. I tend to be quiet. I tend to try to think about it.
mm,
But if I get to a point where I lose my temper, then
mm.
it's, forget it. It's
Right,
like ground zero at that
right,
point.
right.
But that first point that we were talking about, or one of the points we discussed, was that break.
Mm,
So you now knowing how Brian is, and if you
mm,
recognize that, or if you're in a relationship where you recognize that in your partner, you know, you can take that step to say, you know what, let's take a quick break. Let's
mm,
relax. Let's give ourselves a moment, and we'll come back to this. Because if you're already seeing that cycle repeating or starting,
mm.
you already know that you're not going to get any further. So
Right,
there's no point in going through the cycle 2 or 3 times to drive the point,
right.
because you're going to get the same result.
Mm,
So, all in all, it's finding out the mechanisms that work. And there's so many out there. And even today, one of the things that's so exciting is AI, right?
right, yeah.
I'm loving Chat GBT, even though I know that there's maybe, another side of this where we should be concerned about AI.
Oh,
But
yeah.
some of this stuff is out there, and you can go on there and say, listen, what do you recommend of us in a situation such as this?
Oh, I do. I
What
Google
communication
everything.
point exactly?
Well, I
And
Google.
right, no, that's
You
perfect.
know me, I'm old school.
But that's you have a world of information out
Right,
there.
I do. Yeah.
And the thing is, go out there, research a little bit, and understand that personality type and how they react to things. That way, you can better communicate with your partner
Mm.
and have those discussions on a, let's say, a more even playing field.
Yeah, so I'll work on that. So we have a couple minutes left. So let's just touch on victimhood
Mm.
because when a person plays the victim role, I
Hmm.
mean, it just drives me insane.
Right.
I don't know why. I have never been the victim ever. And I've
Hmm.
had past relationships where people are constantly the victim, feeling sorry for themselves,
Hmm.
or what is it? Like from a man's perspective, is it a cop out? Is it a way to stop the fight? Is it insecurities? What is it?
It can be. I mean, victimization, coming down to that point where, oh, I'm the wrong one. I did everything wrong. I
Right.
mean, in some cases, it does come down to that where you get so frustrated and you're just like, all right, enough.
Yeah.
It's my fault, right?
Mm.
That's not really an answer to the situation. That's just a
Right.
way to try to end it. But sometimes it can, come from insecurity,
Mm.
and that insecurity is something that that individual needs to reflect on and really, and in any argument I always say, take a quick moment, reflect on yourself, and say, all right, why am I getting upset in this moment? Is it really what they're saying? Is it something that I did and I got caught in the act of it? There's so many different things that can lead to that, but inner reflection is a big thing. And
Mm.
again, victimization is typically a way to, like you said, either cop out or try to end the situation, and not really get to an end result.
Right. No, that makes so much sense. So I think we covered so many amazing points of
Mhm.
communicating, of listening. Oh, and that's another one. Active listening has been the
Yes.
hardest thing for me to learn in my life
Hmm.
because I'm such an aggressive talker. And even though I'm a woman, I'm a life coach. So I'm used to finding solutions, or not really finding solutions, but giving tools to
Hmm.
people to figure it out on their own. But it's hard to just sit back and listen.
Hmm.
And I've learned in my relationship with Brian to just stop and listen.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's one of the biggest pieces of communication, right? Because if you're talking, you're not listening,
Right.
and then you're not really grasping what the other person's saying. So just like Lisa said, I mean, listening, extremely important. Definitely discuss the issues, but discuss them. And if you feel that it's escalating, take a break and come back to it.
Yeah.
Don't victimize.
Right.
Don't take a victim approach, because that's not a solution. That's just a way of trying to end the conversation, or you know taking blame when you're not really taking blame, right? I mean,
Right.
I think that happens a lot. But and then again, really learn your partner and their style, right? Their
Mm.
personality type, and really learn about
Their
that
love
personality type.
language.
Exactly, exactly.
So true. And
Hmm.
remember, don't point the finger.
Hmm.
Point the finger at yourself and express how you feel internally about the situation or what's happening. I think we covered a lot of good stuff today.
Yes, I do. I
That'll not
agree.
only help all of you, but it'll help us in our relationships.
And just remember that we're all growing, we're all maturing. And even for parents out there that are watching us, don't forget, and I say this to my kids all the time, I say, guys, do not forget that I'm growing up at the same time that you are.
Mm.
I wasn't born a parent. There is no manual here. So I'm making decisions as best as I can with everything that's coming at me as a parent. And, that kind of helps them understand as well that, hey, you're learning this at the same time that I am. So a lot of great points today, and I'm sure we'll put some on our website,
Mm.
also on our podcast, which is going to be coming out here soon, also titled In One Day, which we're going to be putting on Spotify. And you can visit our website, inoneday.tv.
And a lot of great online programs
Mm-hmm.
coming up on self-love,
Mm-hmm.
on love and relationships, on working out, loving yourself. So my how I want to end this show is to remember to love yourself
Mm-hmm.
and be kind to yourself every single day, and breathe in beautiful positive energy, exhale out negative energy, and bring yourself to a higher level of consciousness so that you could fill yourself with peace, love, and light. And therefore, you will be more patient
Mm-hmm.
with your partner.
That's right. So once again, thank you for joining us for another episode of In One Day. Again, visit us on inoneday.tv and look out for our podcast coming out soon on Spotify. We'll let you know when it's up.
Thank you.
Thank you.